A dying billionaire left a $20 tip to a struggling waitress.
She cried.
Not because it was too little, but because it was exactly enough. 8 days later, lawyers in expensive suits walked into her restaurant. What they told her next made the entire town go silent. This is the true story of how one man's final test changed everything. And by the end, you'll never look at a simple act of kindness the same way again. Stay with me. This one will break your heart and put it back together. Welcome to Reality Stories Hub. While you are here, please hit the subscribe button and comment your view on the story and where you're watching from. Let me tell you a story that will change the way you see the world. It's about a man, a waitress, and a $20 bill that carried the weight of a lifetime. His name was David Richardson, and if you'd seen him that Tuesday morning, you wouldn't have looked twice. He was driving an old pickup truck with rust eating through the wheel wells. His jacket was faded, the kind you find at thrift stores. His hands were weathered, his face lined with age. He looked like a man who'd worked hard all his life and had little to show for it. But appearances, as we all know, can be deceiving. David Richardson wasn't poor. He was the founder of Richardson Industries, one of the largest renewable energy companies in the world. His signature had approved contracts worth billions. His decisions had created thousands of jobs. World leaders had his personal phone number. But none of that mattered anymore. 3 weeks ago, David had sat in a doctor's office with cream-colored walls and motivational posters that felt like cruel jokes. The doctor, a kind woman with tired eyes, had told him the truth. 6 months. Maybe 8 if he was lucky. The cancer had spread too far, moved too fast. There was nothing more they could do. David had nodded, shook her hand, and walked out into a world that suddenly felt both infinitely precious and utterly meaningless. He had no children. His wife, the love of his life, had died 5 years earlier. His younger brother, the only family he had left, was already comfortable, running his own successful business. David's company had a board of directors who were already positioning themselves for the power vacuum his death would create. They didn't care about his vision for a cleaner world. They cared about quarterly profits and stock prices. David had spent 40 years building an empire, and he realized with crushing clarity that he had no one to leave it to. No one who would carry forward what mattered to him. No one who understood that real wealth wasn't measured in bank accounts. So he made a decision. He would find someone. Not someone with the right credentials or the right connections. Not someone who knew how to play the corporate game. He would find someone with something far more rare, a good heart that life hadn't managed to harden. He'd done this twice before in different cities, different diners. Both times he'd been disappointed. The first waitress had rolled her eyes at his small tip and complained loudly to her coworker. The second had pocketed the money without a second thought and ignored him for the rest of his meal. David wasn't judging them harshly. Life is hard. People have bad days. But he was looking for something specific. Something he was beginning to fear didn't exist anymore. This was his third and final attempt. After this, he would accept that perhaps the world had changed too much. Perhaps kindness without expectation of reward was extinct. The town was called Riverside, a small community 3 hours north of any major city. It was the kind of place where everybody knew everybody, where the local hardware store had been run by the same family for 4 generations, where Friday night football games were still the biggest event of the week. David parked his truck outside a place called Maggie's Kitchen. It was a small restaurant with a faded red awning and a neon sign in the window that flickered occasionally. Through the smudged glass, he could see red vinyl booths and a long counter with spinning stools. It was exactly what he was looking for. A place where people worked hard for every dollar. He sat in the truck for a moment, gathering himself. His hands were shaking slightly. Not from fear, but from hope. Dangerous, foolish hope that maybe this time would be different. The bell above the door chimed as he walked in. The smell hit him immediately. Coffee, bacon grease, and something sweet baking in the back. A few locals sat scattered around, farmers in work clothes, an elderly couple sharing a piece of pie. Soft music played from a radio behind the counter. And there she was. Her name was Rosa, though David didn't know that yet. She looked to be in her early 30s, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. She wore a simple uniform, a blue polo shirt with Maggie's Kitchen embroidered on it and black pants. There was a tiredness around her eyes, the kind that comes from carrying weight that no one else can see. But when she looked up and saw David standing by the door, she smiled. Not a fake customer service smile, but something genuine, something warm. "Sit anywhere you like, honey," she called out. "I'll be right with you." David chose a booth in the corner, away from the other customers. He wanted to observe. He wanted to see who this woman was when she thought no one important was watching. Rosa moved through the restaurant with practiced efficiency. She refilled coffee cups without being asked. She laughed at an old man's joke even though David suspected she'd heard it 100 times before. She patiently explained the menu to a tourist family, recommending the daily special with genuine enthusiasm. And then she made her way to David's table, pulling out a small notepad from her apron pocket. "What can I get started for you today?" she asked, setting down a glass of water with ice. David looked up at her, this stranger who held his future in her hands without knowing it. "Just coffee," he said, his voice rougher than intended. "Black. And maybe some toast. Wheat if you have it." "We do," Rosa said, writing it down. "Butter and jam on the side?" "That'd be fine." She smiled again and walked away, and David Richardson, billionaire and dying man, sat in a worn booth and prepared to conduct the most important test of his life. The test that would determine not just who would inherit his fortune, but whether his faith in humanity was justified. The test was about to begin. I need you to understand something about what David was doing. He wasn't playing a game. He wasn't entertaining himself at someone else's expense. He was searching for something that his whole life of success and money had failed to show him, proof that goodness still existed in places where it wasn't profitable. Rosa returned with his coffee and toast. The coffee was hot, strong, and served in a thick ceramic mug that had probably been washed 1,000 times. The toast was golden brown, exactly as he'd requested. "Is there anything else I can get you right now?" she asked. "No, thank you," David said. Then, as she turned to leave, he added, "Actually, wait." She turned back, patient. "This coffee," he said, taking a sip and wincing slightly. "It's too hot." Rosa's expression didn't change. "I'm sorry about that. Would you like me to bring you some ice to cool it down? Or I can pour you a fresh cup and let it sit for a minute." "Ice will be fine," David said, a bit gruffly. She brought him ice without hesitation, without a sigh, without any sign of annoyance. "Anything else?" David shook his head, and she left him alone. He sat there, letting his coffee cool, watching her work. A mother came in with 3 young children, all of them loud and energetic. The youngest, a boy who couldn't have been more than 4, immediately spilled his orange juice across the table. The mother looked mortified, exhausted, on the edge of tears. Rosa appeared instantly with towels and a warm smile. "Don't you worry about that," she told the mother. "I've got kids of my own. This happens 10 times a day. Let me get him a new juice in a cup with a lid this time." The mother's shoulders relaxed. The little boy stopped crying, and Rosa cleaned up the mess like it was nothing at all. David felt something stir in his chest. But he wasn't finished with his test. He called Rosa over again. "Miss?" "Yes, sir?" "This toast is cold now. And the butter is too hard. It won't spread." This was it. This was where most people broke. Where the mask slipped and the real person underneath showed through. Rosa looked at the toast, which was indeed cold because David had deliberately let it sit. "I am so sorry about that. Let me bring you fresh toast, and I'll make sure the butter is room temperature. Would you like me to spread it for you, or would you prefer to do it yourself?" David blinked. She was offering to butter his toast for him. Not sarcastically. Not with resentment. But with genuine care. "I can do it myself," he said quietly. "Okay, I'll be right back." She returned with fresh toast and soft butter, and this time she lingered for just a moment. "Are you doing all right today?" she asked, and David could hear that she really wanted to know. "You seem a little down, if you don't mind me saying." David looked up at her. This stranger who saw through his test to something real underneath. "Just a long road behind me," he said. and not much road ahead. Rosa nodded, understanding passing across her face. Well, you're here now. And that means something. Today is still yours. Then she left him to eat his breakfast, and David found himself blinking back tears for the first time since his diagnosis. But he still had one more test. He ate slowly, watching Rosa handle a dozen small crises with grace. A burned order she apologized for even though it wasn't her fault. A customer who couldn't find his wallet and was panicking until Rosa quietly told him she'd cover it this time. An elderly woman who just wanted someone to talk to, and Rosa stood there listening even though David could see 3 other tables waiting for her attention. Finally, David finished his meal. The bill came to $12. He pulled out his wallet, an old leather thing that had seen better years, and laid down $15 in cash. Then, after a long pause, he added a single $20 bill. In a town like this, where minimum wage was the standard and tips were usually a couple of dollars, $20 on a $12 meal was significant. But it wasn't extravagant. It wasn't life-changing. It was just decent. The kind of tip that acknowledged good service without being flashy. David stood up, putting on his jacket, but he didn't leave. He moved to a booth near the front, where he could see the counter, and pretended to look at his phone. Rosa came to clear his table. She picked up the money and counted it. David watched her face carefully. Her eyes widened slightly when she saw the 20. She stood there for a moment, just holding it, and then she did something David didn't expect. She pressed the $20 bill against her heart and closed her eyes. Her lips moved, forming words he couldn't hear. Then she took a deep, shaky breath, and a single tear rolled down her cheek. David felt like he'd been punched in the chest. Rosa walked quickly to the back, and through the service window, David could see her talking to an older woman, probably the owner. Rosa was showing her the $20 bill, and David could see her lips forming words. This is it. This is exactly what I needed. He stood up and walked closer, pretending to look at the dessert case near the counter, and he heard Rosa's voice, trembling with relief and joy. I can buy her medicine now. I don't have to choose between her medicine and our rent this month. I can get both. The older woman hugged Rosa tight. Thank God, honey. Thank God. And David Richardson, the man who had come to test a stranger's character, realized something profound. He had been testing her. But life had already tested her in ways he couldn't imagine. And she had passed every test with a grace that put him to shame. David couldn't leave. His feet wouldn't move. He stood there by the dessert case, his carefully constructed test crumbling around him like sand. He had thought he was the one with power in this situation. He had the money, the secret, the ability to change someone's life. But in that moment, watching Rosa clutch that $20 bill like it was a winning lottery ticket, he realized something that should have been obvious all along. He wasn't testing her character. He was witnessing it. And there was a world of difference between those two things. David sat back down at his original booth. When Rosa emerged from the back, her eyes red but her smile restored, he called her over. Miss, could I trouble you for a minute? Rosa came over, looking concerned. Is everything okay? Did you forget something? No, David said. I couldn't help but overhear. You mentioned medicine. For someone who needs it. Rosa's face flushed. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. That was unprofessional. I should have kept that private. Please, David said gently. Don't apologize. I'm asking because I care. Who needs medicine? Rosa hesitated. David could see her weighing whether to trust this stranger, this customer she'd never seen before. But something in his face must have convinced her, because she slid into the booth across from him. My daughter, Rosa said quietly. Lily. She's 7 years old, and she has type 1 diabetes. The insulin costs $300 a month even with our insurance, and I make $9.50 an hour here. My husband, he works construction, but the work isn't steady. We're good people. We work hard. But some months, the math just doesn't work, you know? David nodded, his throat tight. This month, we had to fix our car because I can't get to work without it. That took money we'd saved for Lily's insulin. I've been picking up every extra shift I can, saving every tip, cutting everywhere I can cut. And that $20 you left? That's the last piece. That means tomorrow I can go to the pharmacy and pick up her prescription. That means my baby girl stays healthy for another month. She wiped her eyes, embarrassed. I'm sorry. I don't know why I'm telling you all this. Because I asked, David said. And because you're carrying a burden that no one should carry alone. They sat there in that booth, a billionaire and a waitress, and for the next 2 hours, David listened. He didn't tell her who he was. He didn't hint at his wealth or his power. He just listened like any decent human being should. Rosa told him about her life. How she'd wanted to be a teacher, had even finished 2 years of college before her father got sick. How she'd come home to take care of him, watching his savings evaporate as the medical bills piled up. How he died anyway, leaving her with debt and grief and a determination to never let her own daughter suffer the same way. She told him about Lily, who was smart and funny and wanted to be an astronaut. About how Lily had learned to check her own blood sugar because she'd seen how stressed it made her mom. About how this 7-year-old child had once told her mother, "It's okay, Mama. We'll figure it out. We always do." Rosa told him about the other waitresses at Maggie's kitchen, women who covered her shifts when Lily was sick, who brought over groceries when things got tight, who formed a circle of support in a world that often felt like it was trying to knock them all down. And David listened to every word, understanding with painful clarity that he had been living in a different world. A world where problems were solved with phone calls and wire transfers. A world where suffering was an abstract concept, not a daily reality. When Rosa finally glanced at the clock and realized how much time had passed, she stood up quickly. I'm so sorry. I've been talking your ear off, and I have tables to take care of. Don't apologize, David said. Thank you for sharing that with me. Your daughter is lucky to have you. Rosa smiled, and it was like sunshine breaking through clouds. I'm the lucky one. As she walked away, David sat there, his mind racing. He pulled out his phone and made a call. His lawyer answered on the second ring. James, it's David. I need you to draw up papers. Tonight. I've found her. On the other end, his lawyer, a man who'd known David for 30 years, let out a breath of relief. Thank God. Are you sure this time? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. David stayed at Maggie's kitchen for another hour, drinking coffee he didn't need, watching Rosa work. He saw her patience with difficult customers. He saw her sneak extra fries onto a kid's plate when his parents weren't looking. He saw her help the cook when the lunch rush got overwhelming, even though that wasn't her job. He saw a woman who had every reason to be bitter, to be angry at the world, to take out her frustrations on the people around her. Instead, he saw someone who met hardship with grace and treated every person who walked through that door with dignity. When David finally left, he didn't say goodbye to Rosa. He just left a note on a napkin, written in his careful handwriting. The storm won't last forever. The sun is coming, I promise. Rosa found it when she was cleaning his table. She read it, smiled at the kind words from a stranger, and tucked it into her apron pocket as a little reminder that good people still existed in the world. She had no idea that those words were more than just comfort. They were a promise. And David Richardson always kept his promises. 8 days later, on a Wednesday morning when the autumn sun was just beginning to warm the streets of Riverside, 3 people in expensive suits walked into Maggie's kitchen. The restaurant went quiet. In a town like this, people in suits meant one of 3 things: bank foreclosures, IRS audits, or lawyers. None of them were good news. The older woman who owned the restaurant, Maggie herself, stepped forward. She was a tough woman in her 60s who'd weathered 2 divorces and a recession without flinching. But even she looked nervous. Can I help you folks? Maggie asked, her voice steady despite the worry in her eyes. The lead lawyer, a woman with silver hair and kind eyes, smiled gently. We're looking for Rosa Hernandez. Is she working today? Every head in the restaurant turned toward the kitchen, where Rosa had just emerged with 2 plates of food. She froze when she heard her name, the plates trembling slightly in her hands. I'm Rosa, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. What's this about? The lawyer's expression softened even further. My name is Catherine Wells. I'm an attorney with Wells and Associates. We're here regarding the estate of David Richardson. Rosa blinked, confused. I don't know anyone named David Richardson. Catherine reached into her briefcase and pulled out a photograph. Do you recognize this man? Rosa took the photo, with shaking hands. It showed a professional portrait of a distinguished older man in a suit, but Rosa saw past the expensive clothes and professional styling. She saw his eyes. Those same kind, sad eyes she'd seen 8 days ago. The man with the cold coffee, she whispered. The one who left me the $20. Yes, Catherine said gently. Mr. Richardson visited your restaurant on the 15th of last month. He passed away 5 days ago. The plates slipped from Rosa's hands. They shattered on the floor, but she didn't notice. The room was spinning. No, he seemed fine. He was just a customer. Maggie rushed over, putting her arm around Rosa's shoulders. Give her space, she said to the lawyers. And someone please explain what's going on here. Catherine nodded and pulled out a chair for Rosa. Please sit down. I know this is shocking, but I need you to hear what I have to say. Rosa sat, and Maggie stood beside her, protective. The other customers had stopped even pretending to eat. Everyone was listening. David Richardson, Catherine began, was the founder and CEO of Richardson Industries. His company pioneered affordable solar technology and employed over 50,000 people worldwide. At the time of his death, his personal net worth was estimated at $1.2 billion. Someone in the back of the restaurant gasped. Rosa just stared, not understanding. 3 months ago, Catherine continued, Mr. Richardson was diagnosed with terminal cancer. He had no children, no close family to inherit his estate. So he made a decision. He would find someone worthy of carrying on his legacy. Someone who embodied the values he held dear. Catherine pulled out more papers. He visited 3 different towns, 3 different restaurants. He was looking for something specific. Someone who showed kindness without expectation of reward. Someone who remained good even when life was hard. Someone who understood that real wealth isn't measured in money. Rosa's hands were shaking so badly that Maggie had to hold them steady. In his final weeks, Mr. Richardson made significant changes to his will. He left provisions for his employees, for his company, for various charities. But the bulk of his personal fortune, he left to you, Rosa. The silence in the restaurant was absolute. Rosa shook her head, backing away, even though she was already sitting down. No, that's not possible.
I didn't do anything.
I just served him breakfast. I was just nice to him, because that's what you're supposed to do. That's what decent people do. Exactly, Catherine said, and there were tears in her eyes now. That's exactly why he chose you. Because you were kind when you didn't know he was anyone special. Because you cried over a $20 bill not because it was money, but because it meant your daughter could have her medicine. Because you didn't see a customer. You saw a human being who needed kindness. Catherine opened her briefcase and began laying out documents. Mr. Richardson has left you his home in the mountains, valued at $4 million. He has left you a portfolio of stocks and bonds worth approximately $600 million. And he has established a foundation in your name with instructions that you are to use the funds to help families struggling with medical costs, particularly insulin and diabetes care. Rosa couldn't breathe. The numbers were too big. They didn't make sense. They couldn't be real. There's one condition, Catherine said softly. You must use a portion of the funds to establish a scholarship program here in Riverside. For people like you who had to leave college to take care of family. People who have the intelligence and the heart, but not the resources. I don't understand, Rosa whispered. Why me? Why would he do this? Catherine reached into her briefcase one more time and pulled out something small. It was a plastic envelope, and inside was a $20 bill. Rosa's $20 bill. He asked me to return this to you, Catherine said, along with a message. He wrote it down 3 days before he died, in the hospital. Would you like me to read it? Rosa nodded, unable to speak. Catherine unfolded a piece of paper, and in the quiet of that small-town restaurant, she read the final words of a billionaire to a waitress. Dear Rosa, you gave me something I thought I'd lost. Faith that goodness still exists in this world. You didn't know I was watching. You didn't know I was anyone important.
But you were kind anyway.
You were patient anyway. You cared anyway. That $20 was the best investment I ever made because it showed me who you are when nobody's looking. The money I'm leaving you isn't a reward. It's a tool. Use it to make sure other mothers never have to choose between medicine and rent. Use it to help other people the way you would have helped yourself if you'd had the chance.
This isn't charity.
This is justice. You earned every penny by simply being the person you are. Thank you for restoring an old man's faith. Take care of Lily. Take care of yourself. And take care of others the way you took care of me. The sun is here now, just like I promised. Let me tell you what happened after that day, because this story doesn't end with tears in a restaurant. It ends with something much more powerful. Rosa didn't quit her job at Maggie's kitchen right away. That surprises people when I tell them, but it shouldn't. Because Rosa understood something that most people don't. Money doesn't change who you are unless you let it. For the first month, she kept working her regular shifts while the lawyers helped her understand what had happened, what she now had, and what responsibilities came with it. She still made breakfast for the regulars. She still laughed at the same old jokes. She still covered shifts for her coworkers when they needed it. But she did buy Lily's insulin. And she paid off their car. And she made sure her husband could take a week off when he hurt his back on a job site. The town was buzzing with the news, of course. In a place like Riverside, a story like this traveled faster than wildfire. Some people were happy for Rosa. Some people were jealous. And some people, if we're being honest, started treating her differently. Started seeing her as a walking bank account instead of a person. But Rosa handled it with the same grace she'd handled everything else in her life. When people asked her for money, she'd sit down with them and listen to their story. Sometimes she helped. Sometimes she didn't. But she always treated them with dignity. She always listened. Because Rosa understood that poverty doesn't make you noble and wealth doesn't make you evil. What matters is what you do with what you have. 3 months after that day in the restaurant, Rosa opened the Richardson Foundation for Medical Access. She hired people who'd worked in healthcare who understood the system and its failures. And she started helping families who were drowning in medical debt, who were making impossible choices between treatment and rent, who were rationing insulin and hoping they'd survive until the next paycheck. In the first year alone, the foundation helped 3,000 families. 3,000 families who didn't have to choose between medicine and food. 3,000 families who could breathe a little easier. Rosa also kept David's other promise. She established the Riverside Opportunity Scholarship, a program that gave full college tuition to students from working families. Students who'd had to drop out to take care of sick parents. Students who'd given up their dreams because the math didn't work. Students like Rosa herself had been 15 years ago. The first year, they gave out 5 scholarships. Last year, they gave out 200. But here's the thing that matters most. Here's the part of the story that I want you to really hear. Rosa didn't use that money to build monuments to herself. She didn't use it to become famous or powerful. She used it to do at scale what she'd been doing in that restaurant every single day, seeing people who were invisible, helping people who were struggling, and treating every human being with dignity. The foundation offices are in a simple building on Main Street in Riverside. On the wall in the lobby, there's a frame. Inside that frame is a $20 bill, worn and faded. And beneath it, a plaque with David's words, "The value of a gift is not in its size, but in the heart of the one who receives it." Lily is 15 now. She's healthy, thriving, and yes, she still wants to be an astronaut. She volunteers at the foundation every summer, helping other kids with diabetes understand they're not alone. Rosa still lives in Riverside. She moved into a nicer house, but not a mansion. She drives a reliable car, but not a luxury vehicle. She dresses well, but not extravagantly. Because Rosa understands something that took David Richardson a lifetime to learn. The richest people aren't the ones with the most money. They're the ones who know what truly matters. Last year, on the anniversary of David's death, Rosa visited his grave for the first time. It's in a quiet cemetery overlooking the mountains. The headstone is simple, just his name and dates and one line. He found what he was looking for. Rosa stood there for a long time, and then she did something beautiful. She pulled a $20 bill from her purse, folded it carefully, and placed it on his grave, held down by a small stone. "Thank you," she whispered to the man who'd tested her character and found her worthy. "Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for believing in me. And thank you for teaching me that we all have the power to change someone's life. We just have to be paying attention."
So, here's what I want you to take from this story.
Here's why I told it to you today. We spend so much of our lives waiting for the big moments, waiting for the dramatic gestures, the grand opportunities to prove who we are. We think that our character will be tested in obvious ways, in moments we'll recognize as important. But the truth is simpler and more profound than that. Your character is being tested right now. In how you treat the person serving your food. In how you respond when someone inconveniences you. In what you do when you find money that isn't yours. In how you behave when you think nobody important is watching. David Richardson was looking for someone who was kind not because it would benefit them, but because kindness was who they were. He was looking for someone who treated a $20 bill like a miracle not because they were greedy, but because they understood its true value. And he found Rosa not because she was perfect, but because she was genuine. Because she had been tested by life in ways far harder than anything David could imagine, and she'd chosen to remain good anyway. Every day, we make choices. Small choices that feel insignificant. How we speak to strangers. How we respond to frustration. How we treat people who can't do anything for us. Those choices don't feel important in the moment. But they are. They're everything. Because somewhere someone is watching. Not to judge you, but to find hope.
To see if goodness still exists.
To find evidence that the world is still worth believing in. Be that evidence. Be the person who makes someone's day a little easier. Be the person who chooses kindness even when it's difficult. Be the person who treats everyone with dignity, whether they're a billionaire or a stranger passing through. Not because you might get rewarded. Not because someone might be testing you. But because that's who you choose to be. That's the real inheritance David left Rosa. Not the money, but the reminder that our character is our truest currency. That how we treat each other in the small moments defines who we are in the big ones. Rosa was always worthy of that inheritance. She just needed someone to recognize it. And you're worthy too. Right now, exactly as you are. You just need to recognize it in yourself. So go out there and be kind. Be patient. Be the person who sees others when they feel invisible. Be the person who leaves generous tips not because you have to, but because you know what $20 can mean. Be the person who restores someone's faith in humanity. Because you never know who's watching. And more importantly, you never know whose life you might change just by being exactly who you are when you think it doesn't matter. That's the story. That's the lesson. That's the inheritance we all share. Your move is now. Make it count.